Welcome everyone to a new series of videos I'm going to start doing, the Top 10 series. This will be taking the place of my classic match reviews. Instead of reviewing just one classic match, I'm going to take a look and do top 10 lists and review 10 classic matches. So you're going to get 10 match reviews for the price of one. That price being zero, since, you watch my videos for free. So that point is completely moot. Anyway, I thought it would be cool to open up this series by doing top 10 wrestling match trilogies. So in this video, you're actually going to get 30 match reviews for the price of one, which, as I've stated before, is zero. But yeah, wrestling match trilogies, I thought it was interesting to do this one because this year alone we've had, really it was the Omega Okada trilogy that kind of inspired me to do this, where their matches were labeled arguably the greatest series, the greatest trilogy of wrestling matches of all time, rivaling the classic Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat matches from 1989. And it got me to thinking, it's like, well, yes, Flair and Steamboat, one of the all-time great wrestling match trilogies. Yes, Okada Omega, right up there, one of the all-time great classic wrestling match trilogies. But I got to thinking, what are the best wrestling match trilogies other than those two? Like, what other ones could I look at and go, yeah, that's a great trilogy as well. That one's a great trilogy as well. And, full disclosure, Steamboat versus Flair and Omega and Okada are both on this list. Where do they appear? You gotta watch the video to find out. But I really had to go back and look at some of my favorite feuds and some of my favorite series of matches and determine where a trilogy would fit. Determining what makes up a trilogy wasn't as easy as I thought it would be as well, because some guys have wrestled each other. Like, the three matches in '89, those were not the only times that Flair and Steamboat wrestled each other at major shows. They were having matches as late as 1994. So, where do you draw the line at where the trilogy starts and where it ends? I decided my determining factors on what makes it a trilogy. The same competitors have to be in every single match. So you can't have a situation where, say, two guys have a pay-per-view match, then they face off on opposing teams at a War Games or a Survivor Series or something akin to that, and then have a third burn-off match. That, to me, is not a trilogy. That match in between has 7 to 8 other guys, 7 to 9 other guys, that aren't in the other matches, so it doesn't count as part of the same series. It's not the same trilogy. And there has to be a unifying theme between the three matches. In the case of Flair and Steamboat, that would be they were all NWA title matches in 1989 at major shows. In the case of something like Rock versus Austin, they wrestled each other at WrestleMania 3 times. Sometimes that was a little bit harder to pinpoint, but there were cases where guys have just wrestled each other so many times. Narrowing down that list to a trilogy was very difficult, but I did the best I could. This is my list, so let's get things started with number 10. You guys probably knew I was going to work Lucha Underground into the list, but I just had to put these guys on here. Phoenix versus Mil Muertes, the matches they had in Lucha Underground, specifically the 3 big ones. They had a handful of matches prior to their Grave Consequences match, but really it's the Grave Consequences match, the Death match, and their Lucha Underground Championship match in Season 2 that really are the main bouts that those two have had together. So I counted them as the trilogy. And at times, the matches they've had together has represented Lucha Underground at its very best. There have been other series of matches that have been very good. Prince Puma versus Johnny Mundo, for example. But these matches were on another level, and to me, they're more indicative of what Lucha Underground was all about, because you had the more mystical elements and the sci-fi and fantasy elements incorporated into it, with Mil Muertes being the avatar of death and Phoenix being the avatar of life, and how Phoenix's powers kind of cancel out Mil Muertes. So early on, he was like the one guy that could beat Mil Muertes. And early on, you also had Katrina thrown into the mix, and there was a love triangle going on there. So there was a bunch of different things going on when they eventually had their the Grave Consequences match, which was Lucha Underground's version of the casket match. An excellent bout that really, people say to this day, still the best match that Lucha Underground put on. I don't know if it's still number one, but it definitely was in that first season and early on in establishing the identity of what Lucha Underground would ultimately become. And really, probably the greatest casket match I've ever seen, too. So, a bunch of great things going on there. Very violent, very exciting, action-packed, and just a great payoff to the build-up up to that point. Their second match was a little bit different, as it was basically a squash match. Mil Muertes had lost the Grave Consequences match, was declared dead, and Katrina used her magical powers to bring him back to life and stated that she needed Phoenix's special powers to increase the powers of Mil Muertes and make him a much darker and much stronger force. So it was time to do the rematch when Mil Muertes made his comeback, and he pretty much obliterated Phoenix, like absolutely destroyed him. And this more, the scarier, monstrous version of Mil Muertes was the perfect choice to ultimately take the Lucha Underground Championship heading into Ultima Lucha Uno. But these two would clash again in Season 2. Phoenix would win the Gift of the Gods Championship, a title that gives the holder of the belt the ability to challenge for the Lucha Underground Championship. And Katrina and Mil Muertes wanted to make sure that Phoenix was not able to cash it in, which led to that whole feud with King Cuerno. Ultimately, Phoenix was able to overcome King Cuerno and then would cash in and get his title shot against Mil Muertes, which had been like the first really well-built match of Season 2. And they tore the house down. Another excellent encounter between the two. One of the best Lucha Underground Championship matches that the show's ever done. And that's saying a lot when you look at some of the matches that Puma's had and what Mundo's done. But that one might be... It's close to being up at the very top of my favorite Lucha Underground title matches. And Phoenix once again got the big win over Muertes. Pretty much closing the book on their feud for good, even though... Katrina would kind of have the last word by forcing Phoenix to defend the title in Aztec Warfare a week later, which pretty much guaranteed he was going to lose. But both characters went off in different directions, and they never really faced each other. As far as I can tell, they never faced each other again. So we did get those 3 big matches out of them, and again, very hard-hitting, very exciting, very action-packed, very violent at points. Excellent bouts that represent Lucha Underground at its very best. Not just from the match standpoint, but from the build-up as well. It's just great stuff all around. There aren't many grudges as personal as a battle between brothers, but that's what we saw in 1994 as Bret the Hitman Hart would take on his brother, the Rocket Owen Hart, in a series of matches that tore the Hart family apart. And, we saw a very jealous and bitter Owen Hart try to upstage his brother and ultimately prove that he is better than his brother, which led to an excellent series of matches between the two, and 3 matches in particular that I believe are worthy of note. Obviously, there's the match they had at WrestleMania 10, which is considered to be one of, if not the greatest opener in WrestleMania history. Bret would go on later that night to win the title, which had only added fuel to the fire. But that first match they had together was an outstanding encounter where Owen Hart got the shock win, which really set the stage for various different things that would take place later. Like I said, Bret would win the title, but then Owen would turn around and win the King of the Ring tournament. So Owen was almost copying his brother's accomplishments because Bret had won the King of the Ring the year before. So you have an Owen Hart who is jealous of his brother, defeated his brother clean at WrestleMania, and now he's won the King of the Ring tournament. He's in line for a title shot, and that's what we got at SummerSlam 1994 in a steel cage match. The two brothers settled their differences inside a steel cage. one of the best steel cage matches of all time. I know Brett said in his book it was probably the best steel cage match without blood in it. I think that's a pretty fair assessment. Excellent encounter all around, and they really utilized the creativity of using the big blue bars as well, with Owen hanging upside down from it and doing a superplex off the top of the cage, and they did that sharpshooter reversal spot, which was great. So a lot of great stuff came out of that cage match. I wish it had closed out SummerSlam, but it didn't. We just had to get Undertaker versus Undertaker as the closer. But stellar championship match. Bret Hart would get the win. But the war was not over yet. We would have one more championship match between the two. It would actually be settled on the first episode of an often forgotten WWF program called Action Zone. This show took the place of USA Wrestling, which was their Sunday morning show on the USA Network, and Action Zone kind of took its place. I actually remember the last episode of USA Wrestling where they blew up the set. I believe I want to say it was Pettingill and Ted DiBiase in the studio, and they were like running out of the building as the set was blown up. And the next week we got the Action Zone, which was main evented by Bret Hart defending his WWF Championship against his brother Owen Hart one final time. Another excellent match between the two. Great stuff. Probably the weakest match that they had together, but as far as being the first main event on a kickoff show for a new weekly program, I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was very good, and Bret Hart would get the win once again, which would pretty much settle their feud, although there was still animosity there for a few years. Like, obviously, Owen would cause Bret to lose the title at the submission match against Bob Backlund in Survivor Series 94. Owen would become tag team partners with Yokozuna because he loved Yokozuna for doing the one thing he couldn't do, beat Bret for the title. And I'm like, wow, what a bitter asshole. It's like, I'm going to be friends with that guy that beat my brother for the belt. I like the cut of his jib. But yeah, really it was those three main matches that they had with each other that were kind of the core of their whole rivalry. And excellent series of matches all around, very personal rivalry. And we got two of the best matches of 1994 out of it, and one very good first main event of a new weekly program. The only negative I have against the Action Zone match is he had Todd Pettingill on commentary, which, Todd, by all appearances, is a nice guy, but everything he says sounds cheesy. Like, you just can't take anything the guy says seriously, so he just doesn't work as a commentator for me. But in any case, excellent series of matches between the two brothers. Loved it, loved it, loved it. In 2007, very late 2007, I should say, Chris Jericho would make his return to the WWE. Unfortunately, it felt like they had almost nothing for him to do, so he was just kind of meandering around for the first half of 2008, until he had a heel turn against Shawn Michaels, rekindling their feud from 2003, and kind of giving a new spark to Chris Jericho as a character, and giving him a whole new main event run, and really kind of reinvigorated Jericho's career. And it was best exemplified in the matches between Shawn Michaels and Chris Jericho. They would have 3 pay-per-view matches in 2008, and it turned out to be an excellent series of matches between the two. They had their first match at Great American Bash 2008, second match at, it was the unsanctioned street fight at Unforgiven 2008, the same night that Jericho would cheat his way into the scramble match where he knocked out Punk and would ultimately steal the World Heavyweight title. And then they would have their final encounter at No Mercy 2008 in the ladder match for the World Heavyweight title, which was excellent. And Jericho even said not too long ago that is his favorite match that he ever had. But what I really liked about these matches was that they had a very NWA old school type of vibe to them. They were old school violent, not like WWE violent, where in a lot of cases WWE violent is like doing stunts and breaking through, trick walls or slam through tables or anything like that. Is like, but no, classic old school NWA violence is kind of like that down and dirty fisticuffs, blood and guts type of wrestling, and that's what these matches had. And this was right around the time that WWE was going PG, and they were going to start to shy away from things like this. So it was nice to get this last gasp of, I guess you could say, the Attitude Era before they would ultimately go to PG. But I really enjoyed the matches they had together, and each one kind of built onto the other one, where you would have the first match end due to referee stoppage with Jericho just attacking Shawn's injured eye and causing it to bleed and the referee stopping the match, which would then lead to an unsanctioned street fight between the two, which Shawn would get his revenge. But then Jericho would win the world title, so you'd have to have a world title match between the two, which was perfect to have them face each other in a ladder match. Easily one of the best ladder matches ever. It's in my top 5 for sure. It's that one, the one at Mania 10, like Jericho and Benoit, Royal Rumble 01, and there's probably a couple others in there, but it's one of the greatest ladder matches ever. And really, once again, showed, in 2003, I thought these guys had great chemistry. I thought they had the best match at WrestleMania 19. I thought the build-up to that match was great, and then they just turned it right around in 2008 and did something really completely different, told a different story with different styles of matches, and it was excellent stuff all around, and it really set up Jericho nicely as a heel that should have gone into WrestleMania the next year as the heel champion, but he just had to drop the belt to Batista and then win it back from Batista just to lose it to Cena, because that's how this operates, apparently. But in any case, it didn't hurt how good this feud was. It didn't hurt how good these matches were. These matches were probably the WWE's best work in 2008, and excellent stuff all around. And from there we move on to 1997 WCW. Randy Savage versus Diamond Dallas Page and the series of pay-per-view matches that they would have in the year of 1997. And it's amazing when you look back at 1997, you think of a lot of great matches that happened that year. Undertaker and Bret at SummerSlam, Eddie and Ray at Halloween Havoc. Two candidates that are up there as being the greatest match of all time, that being Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels at Hell in a Cell, and Bret Hart versus Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania 13. A lot of great matches this year, I feel. The feud of the year, according to PWI, was Randy Savage versus Diamond Dallas Page. Does it deserve it? Absolutely. Their matches were incredible, and I've often cited these three matches, and I've praised these matches before. I've done a couple of classic match reviews of a couple of them, at least one of them, and I often cite these matches as an example of, you don't need to have the world title defended at every single pay-per-view if you can deliver main events like this, because DDP and Randy Savage were trusted with the main event spot at 2 pay-per-views. Their first encounter at Spring Stampede 98, and then again at Spring Stampede 97, and again at Great American Bash 97, where they would have their Falls Count Anywhere match. Those 2 matches are great main events. Diamond Dallas Page won the first one with the Diamond Cutter, which was a huge shock that really put DDP on the map. And then they had their rematch at Great American Bash with Savage going over. And both great main events, great matches, completely worthy of being pay-per-view main events. You didn't need the world title defended at those pay-per-views. Those matches did just fine. And it makes the world title matches down the road more special. Again, Sting and Hogan, yes, the match wasn't that great, but it allowed them to further that build in the meantime and deliver these matches in present time while they had bigger things going on down the road. So it showed that WCW actually had a plan and actually had more attractions to look forward to beyond just spamming world title matches after every single pay-per-view. So you had those 2 matches. They were great. And then they wrapped up their series at Halloween Havoc 97 with their Las Vegas sudden death match. It was basically a last man standing match. I think it's the best one of the 3 they had, and an easy match of the year candidate for 1997. Any other year, it probably would have won match of the year, but this was the year that the Hell in a Cell took place and Bret versus Austin took place, so it wasn't going to get that. But they did get feud of the year, which is more than deserved. Like I said, these matches really put DDP on the map and really solidified him. Even though he lost 2 out of the 3, it solidified him as a guy that could hang with the main eventers and ultimately propelled him to major main event stardom. And DDP had a Hall of Fame career. He got inducted to the WWE Hall of Fame, and I believe that these matches were kind of the genesis of Page becoming a top star. And for Randy Savage, these matches were really the last great matches of his career. These were the last signs of the great talent that Randy Savage really was. And I say that Randy Savage is arguably if not the number one greatest of all time, he is easily top 5 all time. For character, promos, talent, in-ring ability, all of it. I mean, Savage was one of those guys that had everything, and for him to be having matches like this at this stage of his career is really impressive and a testament to how great he was. And good on him for being so unselfish and being willing to put over DDP the way that he did and work with him the way that he did. And for all the talk that, you know, WCW always relied on the past and weren't always willing to make new stars, DDP was one that slipped through the cracks. And thank heavens he did. These matches they had were great. Love these series of matches, and they're 3 outstanding bouts. And actually, the third one is the best one, which isn't always the case with these things. So it's just a perfectly executed trilogy, 3 great matches. Can't ask for anything better than that. And at number 6, we have Ring of Honor making the cut. The CM Punk Samoa Joe matches of 2004 were, in my opinion, and the opinion of many others, the matches that put Ring of Honor on the map and gave them their identity, more than any other match that they did. And Ring of Honor had a lot of great matches, had great feuds before and after this, but these were the matches that really got people's attention and really got people talking about the Ring of Honor brand and really kind of set them apart from all the other companies out there. They weren't just another indie fed. They were really something special. And these matches were just high quality all around. At a time when I think wrestling fans were starved for something different. Not that WWE was bad at this point. I mean, you know, you had Benoit and Eddie as champions, so it wasn't completely a lost cause for WWE, but people were just starved for something different, and the void left behind by WCW and ECW's demise left fans starved for something else. And I think Ring of Honor helped fill that void. I think TNA helped fill that void as well in their early years, but Ring of Honor just produced high-class wrestling involving 2 top talents, and in this case it was CM Punk and Samoa Joe. I mean, if I were going to do a list of the top 10 best matches in Ring of Honor's history, I mean, I would say all 3 of these matches are on there. And granted, I'm not the most well-versed on Ring of Honor. I'm not a walking encyclopedia on everything that is Ring of Honor, but their 3 matches were excellent, and they easily rank up there as some of the best in the promotion's history, even to this day. Their first match at World Title Classic, I believe the event was called, went to a 1-hour draw and really shocked people at how great it was. And I think personally it's the best match that the 3 had. I know everybody loves the second one, and Meltzer gave the second one 5 stars, but I think the first one's my personal favorite, especially with how they worked in Punk's knee injury and how it affected the Pepsi plunge very late in the match, and how Punk was pushed as somebody that could hang with Joe. Joe had been pretty dominant as champion, and yeah, that first match was really, really good and only raised expectations for the second one, which did deliver at Joe Punk 2. Excellent encounter that once again went to a time limit draw. And that leaves us with the third match, which was stated as having no time limit, and it was like, all right, we're going to get a winner in this one. Didn't go the full hour, as Joe pretty much said, is like, you know, fuck this, I've had enough of this shit, and pretty much put Punk in his place and ultimately defeated him. But still a great match. All 3 matches were excellent, great stuff, excellent trilogy. The third one I would say is the weakest of the 3, but it was still an excellent trilogy all around. And like I said, it really, you know, you look at World Title Classic, Joe Punk 2, and the All-Star Extravaganza match, 3 excellent main event caliber matches from Ring of Honor, and you know, for a company that was still somewhat young, they were, you know, 2.5 years into their existence just about when they did the first one, but still fairly young, and for them to be delivering matches like this was really indicative of the quality and style that Ring of Honor would present in the years that would follow. So yeah, Joe and Punk deserve all the praise that they get for these matches. They're excellent. Well, what else is there to really say here? It's 2 of the biggest stars in the history of professional wrestling facing off at the biggest stage in professional wrestling at 3 different events. 3 different years. WrestleMania 15, WrestleMania 17, and WrestleMania 19 featured Stone Cold Steve Austin taking on the Great One, the Brahma Bull, The Rock. They were the 2 biggest stars of their era. The Attitude Era was kind of defined by those 2 men, and it was only natural to put them together at WrestleMania. And again, I think part of this is because of how well spaced out the matches were, but all 3 matches tell a different story, and all of them are great in their own way. The one at 15 was about Austin reclaiming the title from Vince's anointed corporate champion, who was The Rock, and all the storyline components going into that with Vince and Foley and all the other stuff going on. Their match at WrestleMania X7 was more about the 2 top baby faces that the WWE had to offer at that point in time in 2001, squaring off in the biggest stage and the biggest match that I've said was really the end of the Attitude Era. Once they did that match, it was kind of like the Attitude Era was over in my eyes. I didn't agree with the Austin heel turn, still don't, but it was an excellent main event match that is if they hadn't done the Austin heel turn, I would make a case for that being the greatest match in WrestleMania history. It's really, really flippin' good. I think the best match that the 2 ever had together. And then you get the Swan Song, their match at WrestleMania 19, which was really, it was Austin's last match, period, and it was the last WrestleMania match, the last singles WrestleMania match for The Rock until he would ultimately step into the ring against John Cena at WrestleMania 28. So it was kind of the end of the road for both guys, even though it was more so for Austin on this night, with Rock finally beating Austin at WrestleMania. Still a great match, with Rock being the Hollywood heel, one of the best runs of his career, and Austin getting his send-off, a better send-off than he would have gotten if he had never come back after walking out in 2002. These 2 wrestled each other several times, not just at WrestleMania, but it's really the 3 WrestleMania matches that defined their rivalry and defined their careers and the interactions that they would have with each other. These are, when people think Austin versus Rock, it's the WrestleMania encounters that everybody remembers, and 2 of them were main events. 19 felt like a main event, even though it didn't close. Just high caliber stuff from 2 larger than life iconic stars. There's not a whole lot else to say other than that. Next up is a very recent trilogy of matches, and one that I think a lot of people probably assumed I was going to put at number 1 or 2. Kazuchika Okada versus Kenny Omega from 2017, and their trilogy of excellence this year has been astounding. The main event match they had at Wrestle Kingdom 11 earlier this year, I would say arguably the best match in Wrestle Kingdom history. At least, I won't say in the history of the Tokyo Dome January 4th events, because I haven't watched them all, but at least as far as Wrestle Kingdom goes, I'd say it's arguably the number 1 greatest match. They followed it up later that year at Dominion and had an even better match that went to a time limit draw. That was just brilliantly worked. I'll say this much, might be the best 1-hour match I've ever seen. Those are very hard matches to do. You have to be well conditioned to pull it off, and you also have to be a very talented worker to be able to tell a story over the course of an hour, and I thought they did it about as flawlessly as you can possibly do. And then the third match, their encounter at the G1 Climax with Kenny Omega finally defeating Kazuchika Okada with the One-Winged Angel, something that had eluded him in the previous 2 encounters. So really a complete story all the way through. 3 excellent main event caliber matches. They're very recent, and they're highly regarded with good reason. I think they're great. Why are they not higher on the list? I just like the other 3 that much more. There's really no other answer than that, because I can't find anything wrong with these matches. I just really, really like the other 3 picks on this list. So that really speaks to the quality of what's to come later in this list, I think. I bet everybody thought that Flair Steamboat and Okada Omega were going to be 1 and 2 on this list. I swerved all y'all. And I'm sure you all hate me and dislike this video and just go absolutely crazy, but anyway, yeah, Flair Steamboat, they really set the standard for a wrestling trilogy. The 3 championship matches they had in 1989 are legendary and are still highly regarded to this day. I would argue that they're probably the best work from Flair, and maybe the best work from Steamboat. I still really like his match with Savage at WrestleMania, but yeah, I mean, these are the 2 guys at their very, very best. And that's saying a lot because Flair and Steamboat are 2 of the greatest of all time. So for me to be saying that these are probably the best matches that both guys have ever had really speaks volumes. And all 3 of their matches were great. The Wrestle War match, the 2 out of 3 falls match at the Clash of Champions that nearly went an hour. The Chi-Town Rumble match, their first encounter was that one. And just 3 excellent championship matches with the ongoing story that Steamboat is probably the one guy, the Achilles heel of Ric Flair, the one that can figure him out and overcome all the dirty tricks and everything else that goes with it before Flair ultimately defeated him at Wrestle War. But you can't ask for better championship matches than these. You can't ask for better main events than these. They are just classic, old school, exciting professional wrestling from 2 guys that had great chemistry, worked great with each other, and just had outstanding matches pretty much every time they locked horns. These weren't the only 3 matches that these 2 had together, but again, I'm working with a trilogy here, and their 3 '89 matches were very, very, very good. Why is it not higher on the list? I just like the other 2 picks a little bit more. It comes down to splitting hairs and personal preference because really, I have nothing bad to say about the Flair Steamboat matches. That would knock it down. I just like the other 2 matches. For personal reasons, I like the other 2 trilogies that much more. So what could possibly be 1 and 2 after Flair Steamboat? Let's have a look. You know, with all the talk that Okada and Omega are getting, and deservedly so, their matches are stellar, but have people already forgotten that Okada and Tanahashi had 3 of the greatest main events of all time? I mean, their 3 Wrestle Kingdom matches are amazing main events. The one they had at Wrestle Kingdom 9, their second one, made me a New Japan fan. I saw that match and I was like, okay, I'm on board. Because I was kind of disenfranchised with WWE at this point, and I was just looking for any alternatives I could find. And fortunately, Global Force Wrestling presented us with Wrestle Kingdom 9 on pay-per-view. I ordered it, and I've been watching New Japan on the regular ever since. I'm like, you know what? I'm on board with this. Okada and Tanahashi really tore the house down that night. And immediately, when I'd heard that they'd had a match at Wrestle Kingdom 7, I went back and watched that one immediately. I was like, yep, that was an amazing match. And they had other matches before, but again, like Austin and Rock, it's the 2 biggest stars on the biggest stage fighting it in the main event. And they delivered every single time. All 3 times they main evented Wrestle Kingdom, they tore the house down. Tanahashi would get the better of Okada again, when it mattered most on the biggest stage. He would get the best of him at Wrestle Kingdom, and I'll never forget Wrestle Kingdom 9, Okada lost the match and was driven to tears. It looked so real and so believable. I was like, holy shit. The emotion of it and just how perfectly executed everything was just felt believable and real. And I wanted to see another match between them, and I got it at Wrestle Kingdom 10, sorry, I lost counting there. Wrestle Kingdom 10 the next year, Okada would avenge his loss against Tanahashi and would have another stellar main event that might have been, the weird thing is, as great as the 7 matches and as great as the 9 matches and as great as the 10 matches, I think they got better as they progressed. And once you've seen, the one at 9, I'm like, they can't do any better than this. And they did. At 10, if they didn't surpass it, they at least matched it. It was an outstanding series of matches, with Okada finally getting the win and securing his position as the ace of New Japan Pro Wrestling. Just outstanding work from two amazing stars, two of the best stars of this generation. And Okada's still the man. He's been killing it all year long in 2017. And this was kind of the launch pad to getting him up to that upper echelon of being the top star in New Japan. And I couldn't think of a better way to do it. I talked about Austin and Rock, two biggest stars of their generation facing off on the biggest stage. Same thing here, but somehow might not have the same iconic status for American fans, but as far as the quality of the matches go, I would say they were even better. Just great work between two great main event stars. A few years ago, I made a video tribute to Sting. I credited Sting for being the wrestler that made me a wrestling fan. Prior to him, and prior to my exposure to Sting, all I knew was WWF. That was all I knew. I was very young. I didn't know any better. When Ric Flair showed up in WWF in 1991, I had no idea who he was. That was the first time I saw Ric Flair. And before anybody flames me, keep in mind, I was 6 years old, so fuck you. But I didn't know any wrestling outside of WWF until I came across Sting. And once I got exposed to Sting, and specifically his series of matches with Big Van Vader, I was like, you know what? That was what made me someone who appreciates the art form of professional wrestling, and made me realize I wasn't just a brand loyalist to one company. There's other wrestling out there, and if it's good, I want to watch it, and I want to enjoy it. And that's what these matches did for me. And it's something I will always appreciate. What Sting and Vader did in these matches. It was the first series of matches I ever got hooked onto. Because I was used, again, watching WWF, I was used to the Hulk Hogan format, which was build up, build up, build up, build up, Hogan wins, and then you move on to the next thing. That was what I was used to. I wasn't used to an ongoing series of matches with a storyline that developed all the way through. Nowadays, it's like you get 845 rematches and they give you the same match over again until you get sick of it. But here I was like, I just assumed watching the build-up to their encounter at Great American Bash 1992, I assumed it was like, okay, Vader's the villain, Sting's basically the Hulk Hogan of WCW, Sting's gonna win. That was my assumption. Sting's going to win, and if he doesn't win, it'll be like an Undertaker thing where he'll win it back a week later or something like that. But that's what they're going to do. Sting didn't win. After one of the most amazing matches that I'd ever seen, with amazing athleticism on display from both guys, from Sting playing the underdog babyface very well, to Vader playing the monster in a way I'd never seen done before, they tore the house down and shocked me again. When Vader got the win, I was like, holy shit, no one can beat Vader. Look at him. Look at him. He murders people. If Sting couldn't beat him, nobody can beat him. Again, this is what was going through my, at the time, 7-year-old brain, and I wanted more. I wanted to see more of Vader. I wanted to see more of Sting. Because really, what Sting and Vader captured, not only were their matches athletically great, and unlike anything I'd ever seen before them, they really redefined kind of the comic booky superhero type of match. Like, again, I was used to the Hulk Hogan type of stuff. I was used to the Ultimate Warrior type of stuff. But Sting and Vader just took it to a whole nother level. And they just did things that just captured my imagination unlike anything I'd ever seen before. So when these two faced off again in the King of Cable tournament finals at Starrcade 92, I wanted to see it. They once again had the match of the night, and Sting got the win. So it's like, okay, Sting can beat this guy. It's hard, and it's seemingly impossible, but somehow, some way, Sting can do it. Okay, that's reassuring. We got one more match to go. The strap match at Super Brawl 3 for the WCW Heavyweight Championship. Bring it. I want to see it. The White Castle of Fear strap match, which everybody remembers the segments associated with the strap match, but really it's the match itself that was, at the time, one of the most violent, even today, one of the most violent and brutal matches I've ever seen, where it looked like they beat the ever-living dog crap out of each other in this thing. And, a very, very violent and sick match to watch. And Vader once again got the win over Sting, so I guess, it was an important lesson to learn as a kid. Not all endings are happy in the world of professional wrestling, but the 3 matches that these two had together were not just great matches, they were something that really enhanced my love of professional wrestling and gave me something that WWF wasn't giving me at the time. So, at the time, WWF was making a transition more from, like, the Hogan phase to kind of the traditional wrestling from like a Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels and those type of guys. And that's great, and I love and appreciate that. And Bret's run in the 90s is one of my favorite runs of any wrestler in the history of the business. But Sting and Vader gave me that over-the-top, colorful, comic booky type of wrestling and did it in a way that was amazing and unparalleled. And they were such great matches, and again, nostalgia plays a big factor into this, and nostalgia, as I've said before, is a powerful drug. There was no way I couldn't list these matches as my favorite wrestling trilogy of all time. They were just... and again, Sting and Vader didn't just wrestle each other these 3 times. There were other matches after this, but it was really these initial 3 pay-per-view encounters that really I have the fondest memories for, and were really the ones that excited me, and... were my favorites. And it's my favorite wrestling trilogy of all time because of it. So, thank you so much to Sting and Vader for giving me these matches. You really made me appreciate the art form of professional wrestling that much more when you were done with them. They were great. A+, wonderful material all around. And that concludes my top 10 wrestling trilogies. Hopefully you all enjoyed this. I do plan on doing more of these top 10s in the future. Hopefully on a monthly basis. I'm not sure yet. There's a lot of work that went into this, both from a research standpoint and a production standpoint, and considering balancing all that with a full-time job and a personal life, I don't know. But for right now, let's plan on having these on a monthly basis. We'll see if I'm able to live up to that. If I'm not, you can flame me. But in the meantime, you can like this video, subscribe to me, hit the little bell in the corner, and do all that other fun stuff. But for now, that is all I've got for you, so peace out.